I'm so excited today to have Ron Stein. Ron's a professional engineer, an energy advisor. He's a national TV commentator on energy literacy. And today he is going to tell us about what he calls the elephant in the room, plus an amazing company he started called PTS Advance that's been around for a number of years and supplies critical human resources to the energy sector and life sciences project around the US. Ron, we're so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Peter, glad to be aboard.
Ron, so you got to tell me, what is the elephant in the room?
The elephant in the room is the fact that the world populated from 1 to 8 billion people right after the discovery of oil. And the reason being, because oil, you may know, is totally useless unless you're manufacturing something usable. Today, we got 6,000 products and fuels that provide fuel to the 50,000 merchant ships around the world, 50,000 jets around. And all these products are the basis of all the infrastructures we have. We had no medical industry before 1900. We had no military. We had no communication system. And all that stuff is from oil because it's manufactured. And the elephant in the room is that everybody wants to go to unreliables, wind and solar. Well, wind and solar generate electricity from breezing the sunshine, and they manufacture absolutely nothing. And so if we get rid of all the oil and natural gas, coal, there'll be nothing left. We'll be back to the 1800s. If you remember, back in the 1800s, we had a zero-emission society. There were no coal-fired power plants. There were no natural gas power plants. There were no nuclear power plants. And the Beverly Hillbillies hadn't discovered oil yet. But back in the 1800s, life was hard, short, and people, when they were bored, very seldom traveled 100 miles from where they were born. Today, the reason we have the 8 billion people in the world is because of all those products, medications, foods, and fertilizers. And that's the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. So you get rid of oil, that could be the greatest threat to civilization we've ever seen.
Yeah, and that sounds like a big elephant. What I'm curious to talk about with you in that regard is some of the new technologies coming around. Hydrogen is a big one. There's new battery technologies. And of course, you need, I think, what makes oil so important in manufacturing, of course, is high temperature, right? You got to have high temperature heat to make steel, cement, and these other things. Is there anything else, new technologies you see that might be able to mitigate or help us reduce, let's say, carbon footprint? Is there a middle ground?
Peter, we've had over 200 years to develop a clue or substitute, but not able to do it. So I think history is speaking for itself. We have nothing to replace it with. Steel is really coming from coal. And yeah, fertilizers and pesticides is coming from natural gas. Yeah, everybody wants to get rid of oil. I'm all for it. Show me the plan before we jump out of the airplane with that parachute.
No, absolutely. I hear you. And how do you feel about carbon capture and storage?
It's a potential. Like I say, there's no silver bullet answers to the world's energy challenges. We need electricity. We still need all these products. And if you get rid of the oil, you get rid of the products. The greatest thing about getting rid of oil is you ground Air Force One. But no, there's a lot of challenges. And these, I think, are great for short range opportunities. I think the UPS, Amazon, fire trucks, the police department, the post office, all these industries they have a lot of stops, but they never travel more than a couple hundred miles a day. I think fees for that industry would be appropriate because after they do their stops, they go back to home base and charge. To pick a winner and say that's going to be good for society, I'm not sure about that.
It's a little earlier. So in your mind, the energy transition might take more like 100 years or something.
We wrote the book, my co-author and I, about clean energy exploitations, and it was nominated for Pulitzer Prize. And the message in the book is trying to educate people about the environmental degradation, humanity atrocities occurring around the world to mine for all these exotic minerals and metals, the lithium, cobalt, because it's all being mined in developing countries. They have yellow skin, brown skin, black skin people. They have no labor laws, they have no environmental laws, and they're exploiting these people so that the wealthy countries can go green. And it's atrocious and subject to EVs. I personally won't buy an EV for ethical reasons because I know where the lithium is coming from, and I'm not willing to financially support that environmental degradation, humanity atrocities. Governments are willing to do that. They're providing subsidies, EVs, subsidies for wind, subsidies for wind turbines, and all the exotic minerals and metals to support that are coming from these developing countries. And these subsidies are encouraging them to continue that. I think that's unethical and immoral.
It's a good point, and I think not something that everybody considers. Tell me about writing the book. So, a lot of people in the audience, I'm sure, would love to write a book. Most people that I talk to say, "Hey, I have a goal to write a book," but very few people do it. How did you go about it, and what was the journey?
If it was a long journey, my co-author and I, Todd Royal, he's based out of Texas, but he was in California. He's one of the people who left California for Texas. And yeah, we've been talking about this we wrote 2 books before that. And Energy Made Easy, and I'm forgetting the other name. But for the book, Clean Energy Exploitations, it was just a matter of education. Because again, the energy literacy among people is nil. And politicians are setting policies that are just atrocious. You've heard of blood diamonds. These are blood minerals. People are upset about the sweatshops. All the clothing was coming out of the sweatshops in the Middle East. They jumped all over that. But they're not jumping over all this environmental degradation and human atrocities to mine for this stuff. Lithium mining it's dirty. It's strip mining. They say coal mining is dirty. Coal mining is clean compared to lithium. And coal is primarily underground. But lithium is strip mining, and they just degrade the sites. In foreign countries, they've got no requirements to reclaim the land back to traditional. Once they've taken all the lithium out of the site, they just abandon it and move on to the next site. And they destroying rivers and streams. It was just something that we want to bring the message to the public. And I guess that was a message of the book was probably the primary reason it got nominated for Pulitzer Prize.
No, absolutely. And I think that's what great journalism does, right? Is it exposes areas that people aren't aware of because most of us just go through our day-to-day lives and we're not thinking about where the materials come from.
You're right. And in fact, a lot of times people ask me, what is made out of the fossil fuels? And I usually answer that question with a question. I say, take a look in your office, take a look in your house, take a look in the hospital. Try to identify something that was not made with the oil derivatives manufactured from fossil fuel. And you want to get rid of fossil fuel without having a planned replacement? Peter, that's jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. By the way, the parachute is made from fossil fuel.
I'll tell you, this right here is the plastic
Fossil
under the
fuels.
bottle made from fossil fuels. That's a really important element that we need is plastic. And there's a lot of CO2 emitted when they make plastic, when they manufacture it. But we actually I'll plug myself a little. We're an investment bank and we are working with a client that has a carbon negative solution in the petrochemical industry for plastics and it's realistic. So that's why I ask about technologies. There are some new technologies that are coming to the forefront now. And I think that is positive in terms of the energy transition. But of course, you got to be mindful of all the second order and third order impacts, as you mentioned with the EVs. The mining is atrocious. It's got to be cleaned up.
You're right. There's a lot of dark clouds over the transition because in the world, there's over 1.4 billion vehicles and there's 12 million electric vehicles. They represent less than 1%. And today we're running out of electricity. Here in California, during the heat wave, the first thing the governor recommended was don't charge your EVs. Hey, folks, some of the dark clouds is where's the electricity going to be? Like I said, we're at 1%, or some of the states are running short of power. UK, they're they got, I think, a good solution. In the UK, all the home chargers and work chargers are programmed not to work 9 hours a day during peak load requirement. And Peter, the most important thing, all these meters are on separate circuits because the UK knows that they got to rebuild their grid, and who's going to pay for it? The EV users. So rates are going to be going sky high, and being on a separate meter, if they have a problem on the grid, besides the 9 hours a day that they're not going to be working, programmed not to work, they can turn them off. And they don't have an electrical grid problem. They solved with that situation. But no, there's not enough lithium in the world to build as many batteries as we need to. Bear in mind, you got to move about 500,000 pounds of earth to get the metals to make one battery for a Tesla. And that is huge. And it's like I say, there's not enough lithium. Where are the buyers? Right now, the buyers are highly educated, high income, multi-car families, and usually have a home where they can charge the car. Most families are not highly educated. Most are not high income. Most are not multi-car vehicles. And most people live in apartments, park in the streets. And it's like I say, there's so many dark clouds that I think the auto industry has been mandated into a death spiral as we approach this transition to EVs, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I do see the downside. I also see the upside. I'm a real positive guy, as you could probably tell. So I'm a big believer in technology. We put out our New Year's theme this year, and we called the energy transition the moonshot because we think about it like that in terms of we're trying to do something that nobody's ever been able to figure out how to do. And now we're tasked with doing it. So it's like you say, there's all these problems, but those problems can be opportunities because you see, okay, this is a problem. I notice now a lot of startups are coming out of Silicon Valley. They're looking at other types of metals instead of lithium or other types of solutions for batteries. And they may not be able to get there, but like hydrogen, for example, I'm really seeing a takeoff. We're super excited about hydrogen and we're involved in several hydrogen deals. And to me, that's an example of, yeah, we ran down this wind, solar, and batteries path for so many years. And people don't realize we've been trying to go down that path for 20, 30 years now. And it's running into some walls or some resistance. Doesn't mean there won't be opportunities there, but now the hydrogen economy is coming up because people see they need long duration energy storage. And so hydrogen provides that. But it's just, I'm not saying there is no, as you said, one solution that'll solve it all. But I love how and I think this is really unique to the United States and maybe some other countries a little bit, like Israel and some of the other ones. But the US is such an innovative place. It's amazing to see that the amount of innovation coming around this energy sector, which when I first got in the industry, it hasn't been that long, 12 years ago, it wasn't like that. You're really seeing, I think, back then, most of the innovation was going to these little apps and phone things and widgets. But now this innovation is coming towards physical products. And I think it's embodied, for example, in Elon, in that he's the entrepreneur of our time and he's focused on physical stuff. So I loved it. Anyway, that's my sermon on it, but I'd love to get your take on Elon Musk generally. And what do you think of sort of him as an entrepreneur, his businesses, what he's up to?
You're right about all the innovation going on. The big problem with any innovation, be it hydrogen, be it the current battery technology we have today, it's scaling it. We can basically power an automobile with oil from French fries, but you can't scale it. And that's the challenge for any innovation. It's how do you scale it to basically cover the entire world? Like the EVs, and they're trying to take over the market. To do that, you need to have a lot of chargers to replace all the gas stations. And it's uh, it's a challenge. Some of these states have a lot of land between cities, and the amount of chargers can be unbelievable. For that technology, you got to have chargers. When you go hydrogen, because I know some people would have a hydrogen vehicle, love it, but there's a limited number of hydrogen places where you can fuel it up, and they know where they're at. But yeah, scaling it is going to be probably a bigger challenge than coming up with the innovation. You can have this great solution. How do you scale it to accommodate? We have 300 million people in the United States, 8 billion in the world. That's going to be the real challenge.
It is a
Like
challenge. We take for granted the amount of infrastructure around oil and gas. So, for example, the whole pipeline infrastructure on midstream for moving natural gas. You can't do that with hydrogen for a variety of technical reasons we won't go into. So we do have a scaling and infrastructure challenge. And I think we're going to meet it. I'm an optimist and I'm excited about it. Speaking of scaling, Ron, I'd love to know how you said you and your wife started this company, PTS Advance, a number of years ago, and you've scaled it into a very successful business. Tell me about that journey. Would love to learn more.
we started BTS in '95, and interesting, I had spent 20 years at Fluor, mainly in project management, designing and building refineries and chemical plants around the world. And I gained a hell of a lot of knowledge about the energy industry from there. And spent a few years at Bechtel. And in between the Fluor venture and the Bechtel venture, when we hit the oil embargo, I actually jumped out of the industry for a while and joined Universal Studios and went from basically building refineries to working on themed attractions with Universal Studios. And when they built their theme park in Florida, they had one attraction, Jaws, and I was the project manager of the Jaws attraction. And we opened it. Took us 3 years from '87 to '90 to build it. And it opened in '90 and ran for 21 years before they demoed it to make room for Harry Potter. We're current. And when I left Universal, I came back to California and joined Bechtel for a couple of years. And while with Bechtel, I was actually on site at the Unocal refinery and I'm heading up the team doing their maintenance projects. And one day the refinery manager comes down and says, "These engineering firms are too expensive. Get them out of here." He used a few other choice words. And so I basically left the site in Wilmington, California, went back to the office in Norwalk where Bechtel had their corporate office, California corporate office. And there wasn't much work left. Most of the engineering firms, the Fleur's, the Bechtels, the Browns, Parsons, they had already migrated to Houston. And Bechtel says, losing the project, Unocal was a straw that broke the camel's back. They're going to close the office in Norwalk. Peter, hey, I'm out of a job. I'm out of a job on site at the Unocal refinery. And I went back to home base. They're not going to be the home base. So I went to my wife. We had talked about this sporadically about providing staffing to the energy sector. And I said, hey, they're not building any infrastructure in the United States. And all the engineering firms have migrated to Houston. So it looks like my choice to stay in project management is A, go offshore where the projects are, or B, go to Houston where all the engineering firms are. And my wife says, those are both unacceptable options. So we started PDS. And I went back to the engineering manager at Munico and proposed the idea of providing staff augmentation to Unical, which Bechtel was doing basically, at basically half the price. And he liked the concept and we got started. In fact, one of the things he mentioned was having PTS people there augmenting the core staff at Unical. He, as a client, wouldn't see any MITOs. I said, time out. What's a MITO? I've been in this business for 20 years. What's a MITO? He says, miscellaneous indirect overhead charges. And as a project manager, I knew exactly what he was talking about. When you send an invoice to the client, he sees 6 people, and here's an invoice for 30 people, half hour, 1 hour, half hour, that type of thing. So all the miscellaneous indirects. So in this case, if he sees 6 people, he's going to pay for 6 people. And so we got started at Unical, and with that success, we parlayed that to Shell and Chevron and Valero and became pretty dominant throughout California. And we brought on an outside CEO from a big international staffing company. And he was very effective in helping us with mergers and acquisitions. We got several of our competitors. And today, like I said, we started in '95 and it's like 26, 27 years later. We're now staffing the entire energy infrastructure nationwide. and we have about 1,000 contractors working in various locations throughout the country. And we have offices here in California, in Houston, in Orlando, in San Diego, and we have our training staff's 140, and we're self-funded and privately owned and just doing our thing. And I've been phasing out of the CEO position to do what I wanted to with my writings of op-ed articles. I produce op-ed articles weekly, and they get exposed probably to about 500,000 people and in the books. So I'm doing my thing of focusing on energy literacy, and my two sons are running the company with our CEO.
That's exciting. And so I always like to say necessity is the mother of innovation, right? So your wife not wanting you to leave California was the founding of the innovation you had to make to create that business. And now it's 30 years later, and you guys have absolutely done amazing things to grow that way. You don't see too many companies that grow to that scale and are able to execute on M&A without sort of being owned by a big fund or a big company. So that's hats off to you.
Yes, we grew slowly. And like I said, when we started PTS, my wife said, do anything you can. We're staying in California. It's, the initial goal when we started PTS was I needed to replace the compensation I was getting as project manager. And I thought I could get 6 to 10 temps working with contacts I had. And like I say, I guess we built PTS the same way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. We started small, and like I said, we paralleled success to another success. So we were able to do it slowly, and we were able to, like I say, self-fund it all the time. And initially, the first couple of years, we took a loan out on the house to cover payroll because when people spend a time card, they'd like to get paid. They must be paid. We basically finance it that way. But ever since then, we've been able slowly and efficiently, and yeah, we're self-funded for all. Yeah.
That's great. And across energy, what specific kind of projects do you guys like to work on?
Whatever the refineries are working on, those are the projects that we do. A lot of times it's turnarounds. They gear up, they got to do a lot of projects, get them completed because when they do the turnarounds, they bring the refineries down. That's the most efficient time to work in a refinery. Everything's cold and you're not going to create any fires. And so they just work 8 hours a week. And yeah, so a lot of the projects are geared toward that. And a lot of the regulations require other projects to be done. And so we work with them as well as these engineering firms that are supporting the energy industry. They do bigger projects. And like I say, they have core staffs and they need supplemental staffs. We partner with basically the engineering firms as well as refineries to augment their core staffs. That's our niche. And I think we do better than anybody else in the country. That's
That's
success.
great. And you say your boys are running the business for you?
Yes, my son is a CPA. He graduated with his master's in corporate taxation. Yeah, when we started PTS, he was our temporary chief financial officer because he did the books and the payroll. And my younger son used to own an internet service provider, so he was our tech support. And so after about 2 years, it was my wife and I, and we convinced Russell to come join us. And after Russell joined us, we then convinced David to join us because even back in the late 90s, we were running virtual offices because we had sales managers. We didn't have them in the house. My wife wouldn't allow anybody that was not family in the house. And so they were remote and technology wasn't like it is today. David had to go to their house to install something. Now we do it online. But yeah, he's the tech guru. So he's basically the tech specialist, and Russell's the CFO, and Dane's the CEO. And I basically stand by and support the industry, and provide energy literacy, and try and support the client's message that they would like to get out to society. And that in turn helps us and helps them. And yeah, it's a good cohesive team. We really like it.
No, very good. Let's go back to energy literacy. Tell me about all that you're doing there, because I know that in addition to books, you're writing and you're also on TV sometimes, right?
Yes, I do usually one or two radio interviews, TV interviews every couple of weeks. There's a big international conference on climate change coming up in Orlando in February 23rd through 26th, and I'll be one of the speakers. And I will be talking about the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about because, like I say, it's scary that people can make a decision picking winners and losers. And just like Newsom, he says, we're going to have the gasoline vehicle. And he's doing everything possible to get rid of oil in California. Back in 95, California was almost energy sufficient. Between our production of oil here and the imports from Alaska, we provided about 95% of the demands of California. That 5%, because of California keeps reducing in-state production, that 5% is now almost 60%. We're the only state in America that imports oil from foreign countries. And that 60% was today's cost of crude oil is costing California about $150 million a day. Every day. We're sending to foreign countries for their oil. And what does Newsom want to do? He wants to further decrease in-state production. And to do that, we'll be more and more reliant on foreign imports. And today, California, we're the fourth largest economy in the world. We're a national security risk for the entire country because of our dependence on that oil. And it's, we said, just trying to bring that to everybody's knowledge and attention. Do you really want to do that? We saw what happened in Ukraine. They're pretty dependent on Russia.
No, it's true. And it is a big issue. I think the Ukraine war has certainly opened a lot of people's eyes and probably done more for energy literacy than just about any event in our lifetime. Because I know, having been in the industry a number of years, when you go to talk about it, people's eyes glaze over. They get a little bit bored. So, unless you're a geek and you're in the industry, I think one of our challenges is coming up with a way that's relatable, especially to young people, to talk about energy in a simple way. I haven't been able to figure it out, but my son's 20 and he tells me that's a big opportunity because he likes the way I talk about energy and he understands. He's a computer programmer and does a game design, really smart, but doesn't know about energy. And so when I talk to him, he says, "You got to get that message out to everybody because none of my friends get it."
You're right. All my opt-in articles in the books, I do it in layman's terms because I've tried to address the common worker. My goal is I would love to have everybody be energy literate enough to talk about energy at the dinner table. And you're right, energy goes in one ear and out the other because it gets very complicated very quickly. But they keep it in layman's terms. I know I did a recent TV interview a couple weeks ago, and to me, it's gone viral because it was a 35-minute interview. It was a conversation. It's got to be a conversation on energy literacy, and it's been viewed by 180,000 people. I'll share that. And
Unbelievable.
you can share that with your son.
How can we find that conversation, Ron?
What's on my check that out.
Yeah, let us know. We'll put it in the show notes so that way people can link to it. I'm sure
Yes,
it's on YouTube or one of the
it's good.
channels.
It's a YouTube video. Yes,
Yeah, so we'll provide a link to it in the show notes so the viewers can check it out. Who was the interview with?
Epic Times was the TV channel.
Oh, yeah, yeah, so that's a pretty big organization.
Right. And fortunately, their office is right around the corner. We are. So I just went to their facility and we did the interview in their office.
I know, very good. We'll link to that in the show notes so everybody can check it out. And amazing that you built the Jaws exhibit as well. I know you touched on that before, but what was it like working for Universal?
It was different. I know in the oil industry, projects are demanding. The contracts you have with oil companies are pretty demanding, but they expect you to perform and they'll compensate you for it. With Universal, your attitude was a little different with the contractors we had. And a lot of times it was very vague. Something was being painted, had to be painted to the satisfaction of the art director. If the art director didn't like it, you had to redo it at your expense. It was very vague and it was exciting and challenging working with creative people. One thing I didn't was how they dealt with contract. And I think we probably put 20% of our contractors out of business. That I didn't quite care for that. But it was challenging. Being an engineer and working with art directors, and they say they want to do this, and as an engineer, you say, you want to do what? And so it was a real challenge because there was animation, special effects. It was a themed ride. It was like, I'll send you a link to the last ride. Someone did a video of the last ride before they demoed it for Harry Potter. And like I said, it was a 5-minute boat ride, and there was 6 sharks involved. 3 of them were static and 3 were animated. And it was exciting. And we had all kinds of special effects. We had fires and blow up scenes, all kinds of things. So pulling that off was a real challenge. And
That's
I
super cool. We will link to that in the show notes too, if you send us a link. I think that would be neat for people to see. That's another thing that I think a lot of the young people probably don't remember that movie, but it was so popular in the day.
that was one of the reasons that they demoed it because the Jaws attraction was there, and most of the visitors hadn't even seen the movie. And so they had to be more present day in Harry Potter. They did a fantastic job with Harry Potter. That's my granddaughters just love that. And but yeah, it's hard to relate to the Jaws attraction if you haven't seen it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Orlando and a big fan of the Harry Potter up in Universal up there. My son is at University of Central Florida in Orlando, so I try to get up there whenever I can.
You know, an interesting story about Jaws is the opening scene where you see the guy bob into the water. Bruce was the mechanical shark, was supposed to be approaching before this thing happened. And this is Spielberg's first movie. He's got 200 people on the beach filming this thing, and Bruce is broken. So he made the on-site decision. We're going to shoot the scene with the shark, and that's the opening scene. And the music, dun, 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 that's the heartbeat. And for the apartment I had, we spent the first 2 years doing the attractions and ride, the animation, special effects in California from Universal's office, and most of the vendors were in California. And then the last year I was actually in Orlando doing construction. But my apartment, I had soundtrack for Jones. So when you called at me, which I'll answer you, dun 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 dun. This is Ron Stein. I'm not here.
Amazing. So I'll give you some knowledge you may not have. Here in Jupiter, Florida, where I am, you can actually swim with the sharks cageless. And so you can go with bull sharks, tiger sharks, the real, no great whites, but some major kind of sharks. No cage, and no, you don't even need a scuba tank. If anybody loves sharks and wants to learn about them, right here in Jupiter, Florida is a good place to do it. And to your point about California, I love living here. I've been here since 1999, and I've started several companies during that time. And most of those were started so that I didn't have to leave Jupiter.
Okay.
So it's good stuff. Ron, it's been truly a pleasure to have you today. I would love it if you could send us those links as well as any articles that you'd like us to link to on the show notes. I think this topic of energy literacy, excuse me, is extremely important topic for both young people and everyone because as you mentioned, the politicians are just a reflection of us. And if we have better literacy about these topics, then we're going to get better policy, I think, out of our politicians.
I agree. The main thing about energy literacy is conversation. You got to have conversations and talk. Just having a microphone doesn't do it because the person with the microphone, be it Biden or Newsom, it's surprising they've got a huge staff that should know better, but I don't know why they say what they say. Biden flies around with a 200-ton plane that was 100% made with the oil derivatives manufactured from oil, and it's got its fuel manufactured from oil. And he's saying, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. It's coming down. It's
I think there's the political side of things, talking to, say, his constituency, and then there's the policy side. There's a lot of things I will say about the Inflation Reduction Act that I really do. Of course, the title of it is a little bit crazy, but when you get into the details of it, there are a lot of good things in it. I've met with several officials at the Department of Energy, and a lot of them know what they're doing. But I do think it's a challenge because there is extremism on both sides, and politicians a lot of times these days they have to talk to the most extreme opinions instead of the ones in the center. I do think we have in common, and as you say, we can have conversations, and we may not always agree, but at least we have a conversation about it.
One thing about going green is we're basically leaking. I use the term leaking emissions to other countries. We basically manufacture over there or build it over there and then bring it over here. In California, like I say, we're importing most of the oil. And the oil tankers that are bringing in the 60% of the oil we use annually are big emitters. The emissions from those oil tankers annually is double the entire global fleet of California. And Newsom wants to increase it. Like I
Yeah,
said,
I agree. The challenge there is I think we call it virtue signaling, where we think we're being green, but we're outsourcing the emissions. I will say I see a lot of trends towards onshoring for the first time in my adult life. Everything was globalization and offshoring, but now we're seeing a lot more onshoring and nearshoring as a trend. So I think if we can build more manufacturing here or in countries that are close by that are our friends, and then make sure that they're using best practices, both in terms of low cost, but also in terms of what's best for the community and the environment. I think we can get to a better place because it's really hard to monitor things that are going on in China or in other countries around the world.
Peter, you're right. The United States is the most environmentally controlled location in the world. And if you want to build something, you probably want to do it here, produce less emissions, and create job opportunities. And versus leaking it somewhere else. Because I know in California, I joke that Newsom only breathes California air. If breathing anything else, if it's outside his bubble, that's okay. But his bubble's got to be clean at the expense of the world.
Yeah, I try, like I say, I try to stay politically relatively neutral, but I will say I was surprised at how easily Gavin Newsom won the recall attempt. It seemed like a bit of a landslide. It wasn't. So I'm not a citizen of California, so I can't speak to it. I will admit, I'm a huge fan of our governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis. Just a phenomenal governor and individual. And one of the things he does so well is he explains his position in a way that people can understand it. So it allowed him to win by 20+% of the vote. And Florida is really about equal politically. I grew up in this state. And so we have a lot of people that are Republicans and Democrats, and both sides voted for Ron DeSantis because not only does he have good policies, but he explains them really well.
You're right. Like, hopefully, he's going to be a candidate for the presidency. He's a good guy.
Selfishly, I want him to stay here. I'd like to see him just get rid of term limits and stay here for about 20 years.
California, we're a one-party state. There's mostly Democrats registered in California. So the only way you can recall Newsom is the Democrats had to recall, and they're not going to recall. And he basically survived a recall. And the real bad news is his head went from this size to this size. Now he can do anything.
Yeah, it's the last few years in politics have certainly been a challenge to say the least. But hopefully, we do see people start to move back to the center because I do think that most of the right solutions in the end come when you take feedback from both sides.
I agree. Got to have conversations. That's the only way to bring it up. And because there's no silver bullet answer, there's always
Yeah,
unanticipated consequences.
definitely no simple, easy answers in energy in the world of energy. It's going to take a lot of technology, a lot of solutions, everybody working together to go to the next level. And hopefully, we will get some flying cars and futuristic things that we dreamed about that haven't happened yet.
Remember the Dick Tracy talking to his watch? Yeah. What
Ab-
a concept.
yeah, I'd like to see a self-driven flying car. That would be amazing. I hope it happens in my lifetime.
Okay.
Well, Ron, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on Energy Superheroes. And we look forward to catching up with your efforts in energy literacy and also continuing to see your company flourish. Of course, you're very proud of that. And what an amazing legacy to have your sons be able to run the business for you. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Peter. Have a great day.